At 2:30 p.m. local over the South China Sea, an American helicopter was doing something that made Beijing very nervous. To counter this, they scrambled their best attack helicopter to stop it. But the Chinese pilot didn't know he was about to make a career-ending mistake for the next 72 minutes while trying to intimidate the most powerful navy on Earth. This pilot would accidentally teach the Americans something Beijing never wanted them to know. The Chinese Z-10 pilot had been scrambled from Xiamen 28 minutes earlier with orders that basically amounted to go scare off the Americans. The US Navy MH-60 Romeo, think of it as basically the Swiss Army knife of military helicopters, was busy tracking a Chinese Type 039 diesel submarine. The sub had been submerged for 48 hours and was desperately trying to recharge its batteries. Diesel subs are like holding your breath underwater. Eventually, you have to come up for air, and when you do, America is watching. Foreign military aircraft. You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course immediately. The transmission crackled over the radio as the Z-10 pilot banked hard across the Romeo's nose at 500 mph. Just one problem. They were 50 nautical miles away from any Chinese territory in international airspace where America had every legal right to be. The Romeo's 3-person crew, 2 pilots and 1 sensor operator, didn't even flinch because they knew something Beijing didn't. For the next 72 minutes while trying to intimidate the US Navy, China was about to do something incredibly stupid. See, the Romeo wasn't just sightseeing. Those bumps and bulges on its fuselage, those are an ALQ-210 electronic support measures pods. Think of them as digital vacuum cleaners sucking up every electronic emission from that Z-10. Radar frequencies, communication protocols, engine harmonics, everything was being cataloged. While the Chinese pilot thought he was being intimidating, the Z-10 you see flying around here is what happens when you order an Apache helicopter from Wish, built with leftover Russian design assistance from the 1990s when Russia needed cash and China needed helicopters. Sure, it looks intimidating with its angular design, but so does a Toyota Camry with a body kit. Beijing's pilot fired 2 flares around the Romeo. This wasn't an attack, it was theater, the aviation equivalent of a chihuahua barking at a pit bull. The American crew's response: they pointed their dipping sonar directly at the submarine below. The message was crystal clear. We still see your friend down there. The submarine, realizing it was still being tracked despite the aerial interference, dived in a panic. It made so much noise. Cavitation from the emergency dive, hole popping from pressure changes that sensors across the entire carrier strike group heard it. In submarine warfare, noise equals destruction. And the Chinese pilot had just punched his own submarine's ticket while trying to protect it if this had been a real war. But Beijing's pilot was about to discover something worse. Much worse. At 2:48 p.m., after 18 minutes of failed intimidation, the Chinese pilot finally thought he'd achieved something. His fire control radar got a lock on the Romeo. The warbling tone in his headset meant he could finally simulate an engagement. That confidence lasted exactly 3 seconds. That's how long it took for Americans to stop laughing and flip a switch. What happened next was the electronic warfare equivalent of bringing a super soaker to fight Navy SEALs, a nearby EA-18. Growler started blasting the Z-10 with electromagnetic energy using its ALQ-99 jamming pods. Suddenly, the Chinese pilot's radar looked like a TV screen with no signal. His lock didn't just disappear. The American helicopter appeared to split into 12 different contacts. Some were flying backwards, others were apparently teleporting. One showed up inside his own cockpit. This is what happens when 1990s Russian hand-me-down technology meets modern American electronic warfare. The ALQ-99 doesn't just jam radars, it makes them hallucinate. It's frequency agile, hopping across the electromagnetic spectrum faster than the Chinese radar can follow. While Beijing's pilot was looking on one frequency, the jamming had already moved to 50 others. But it got worse. What appeared on his threat display next gave him goosebumps. The U.S. carrier strike group had just lit him up with their spy radars. That's like having the Eye of Sauron suddenly notice you exist. FA-18 Super Hornets were already launching from the carrier deck, not to engage, but to remind Beijing that this Romeo wasn't alone. It had the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet behind it. The Chinese pilot tried everything, switching frequencies, increasing power, even turning his radar off and on again. Nothing worked. The Romeo's electronic warfare suite operated operates across multiple bands simultaneously, creating what specialists call the full-spectrum dominance experience, or what Chinese pilots call "oh no." Meanwhile, the American crew remained so calm they were probably discussing lunch plans. They knew in exactly 4 minutes the situation would get even more embarrassing for China. The Romeo's pilot decided to send another message, a slight bank to point the dipping sonar at the submarine below. The submarine, still being tracked despite all the aerial interference, was now making desperate evasion turns. Each turn created more noise. More noise meant better tracking. The Chinese pilot wasn't helping one bit. The U.S. aircraft commander finally transmitted with the kind of professionalism that only comes from absolute superiority. Chinese military aircraft. This is the United States Navy aircraft operating in international airspace in accordance with international law. We will maintain course and altitude. Translation: nice try, kid. What Beijing didn't realize was that every second was intelligence gold. The amount of data being collected was staggering. Communication protocols showing their encryption was from 2003. Radar frequencies revealing they hadn't updated since buying the Russian design. Even the harmonics of the rotor blades useful for identifying Z-10s from 50 miles away just by sound. But the Chinese pilot wasn't done embarrassing himself. He was about to learn why that was exactly the wrong move. The Z-10 had just entered what Americans call the find-out stage. Frustrated by his complete electronic failure, Beijing's pilot closed to 500 meters, thinking proximity would help. At this distance, he could see the American door gunner manning the GAU-2150 caliber machine gun.